Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton.
Hello and welcome.
They got next, so let's get to the show.
On the Bluff City Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I am joined by my co-host, Alex Winton. And there's a lot of good Grizzlies news to kind of get to this week. We're going to get to the Summer League stuff kind of at the end of the show, talk about the Grizzlies' first Summer League game in Salt Lake City. And we're also going to give a little bit of a preview to them going to Vegas and talk about what that's going to look like, look at their schedule and everything like that. So that's going to be really the second half of the show. But the first thing we got to do is get through the Grizzlies free agency news / extension news. And the first one is going to be the extension of none other than Desmond Bane, 5 years, $207 million. One of, I think, 4 players from his class that got the max extension. Didn't get the super max, which is $260 million because he didn't make All NBA, but he got basically as much as he could get. And honestly, when you look at the way his contract has been set up the last couple years, he was drafted 30th overall, and the way that he's played, he's definitely outplayed his contract the last couple years. He's only been making like $2 million, and he's going to be making 3.8 next year, and he might be averaging close to 25 points a game. Like, we never know. Only making 3.8 million. So not only do I think he's kind of worth this new deal, I think it also does repay him a lot for the way that he's played the last couple years and hasn't really been as financially compensated as a lot of players that are as good as he has been, just because of where he got drafted. But I think when you look at his stats and everything, there's no question that he's a max player. People are going to look at that number and kind of over-exaggerate a little bit or overreact a little bit, which it is a lot of money, obviously. And Desmond Bane is going to have a lot of responsibility to kind of back that up. But when you look at the way he's played his first 3 years going into this 4th season, I think there's no doubt that he deserves it, and he can get a lot better than he is now, and he's already played well enough to deserve a deal of this caliber.
Yeah, I agree. Congrats to Bane. I know there was a lot of talk about what he could get because his deal was going to be different than other deals because of the new CBA and how you can kind of get that 5th year. And so, obviously we knew Bane was going to get an extension. They've been talking about it forever. Well, not ever, but basically since the end of the season, exit interviews, Kleiman was hinting at it. He was hinting at it. So we knew it was going to get done. It's just a matter of when. But as it got closer, I forgot who it was that dropped the article. I can't think. He's a writer. He dropped the article basically projecting what people would make, and he brought up Bane getting like the max contract. And I remember it was talked about getting Bane would get it, has overpaid this and that, blah blah blah. Like that was the discussion, and obviously he got it. And it's still the discussion of people talking about it's going to be an overpay, but people don't understand that he's not just getting paid for his own core production. He's getting paid for just what he's going to provide on and off the floor. And also my thing is you're paying a guy that's a franchise pillar, and even Kleiman even said when you are trying to contend and win, like paying a lot of money is part of the equation. Like you're going to pay money. So, I mean, I'll have no problem with Bane getting a max deal, especially he's gotten better each year. Literally, like last year, he was averaging 25, 5 and 5 before he got hurt. And with Ja being out to start the year, he probably could average 25, 5 and 5 again, or have that potential. And like you said, he's only making $3 million, so it doesn't kick in until the year after. But even then, like I said, it's very well deserved from Bane, because again, you got him at the 30th pick, and that's the type of picks that can change your trajectory of where you're going. And again, all of it was like he's in a perfect situation. He wants to be here. And so yeah, like it couldn't go to anybody better in my opinion. Like I think that he deserved that max for sure. And it's he's gonna show why he earned that money, because a lot of people that don't really watch the Grizzlies are like, oh, he got the max and like he's making 40 women, and they're not really understanding that what he does on the floor and what he does off the floor, especially from a leadership standpoint going into this next year, that's gonna be what he's paid. Like he's worth the money. So shout out to Bane. Love that he's here for another 5. And I'm glad that I said it right after. We got the core 3 guys locked up. The trio's locked up now. I ain't got to worry about nothing about it. And all of them want to be here. And I think that's like a different tone from what we've had in the past with guys. Like it's just different. And so like these guys want to be here and build something. So the fact that you got your best 3 guys under contract for the foreseeable future, I'm sleeping well. I can say that. I can at least say I got my best guys under contract for however many years, so I feel good.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of people were talking about, like, can you win with 3 max guys and stuff like it? Can your third best player be a max player? And I mean, Michael Porter Jr. got the max when he signed his. Nuggets just won the championship. Like, it's very possible. I mean, the Warriors, I know they had some weird contract stuff because they got lucky with Steph's deal when it first happened. But, you know, they've consistently had 3 guys on a max, like, in the past. And it worked out for them. If you get the right 3 guys, I think it can work. And the Grizzlies are convinced that Desmond Bane is one of those guys, and he's going to be basically I guess you could say the Robin to Ja's Batman on offense, kind of being like the dude who does everything else that Ja doesn't do as well. Like, and I think that's another thing, is that he's just a perfect complement to what your number one star does. Like, you got a guy who is all athleticism, going to the basket, all interior scoring, all stuff like that. And then you got a dude who is on track to have one of the best shooting careers in the history of the NBA. When you look at the way that he's played his first 3 years. So, especially when you see the way that the NBA is kind of moving on in terms of, you know, the 3-point shot being so crucial. And also when you look at the way that the contracts are kind of moving with new TV deals and stuff, by the time you get to like year 2 or 3 of that Bane contract, the best players in the NBA are going to be signing deals that are going to be probably for like 65 plus million a year. So that 40 million a year, obviously it's a lot, and he's going to have to play really well to deserve that. But by the time he's actually getting that money, there's going to be a lot of changes going around in the NBA. And I always say this, when people, like, every year, I feel like almost every year, maybe not every year, but a lot of years, whoever is the best player that is up for contract that year is going to sign one of the biggest contracts in NBA history. They just talked about LaMelo Ball. He just signed the second largest contract in NBA history, right? In a couple of years, Wemby's contract is going to be way bigger than that. And it's not necessarily just because he's, you know, not just because it's just him. It's just built into how the CBA works. Like, you're going to make more money as the NBA continues to make more money. So obviously, you know, Desmond Bane's deal was even bigger than Ja's, even though they technically signed the same contract. But Bane's is bigger because it was a year later. And, you know, there was also some other stuff with the All NBA stuff. Neither of them reached that, you know, second kind of bracket to reach All NBA and get to the next level. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see, like, how they navigate that now that they have their main guys kind of under contract. And then it's going to bring up a big question I think it's going to be those 3 guys. You know, they're going to be on the team for the next basically 5 years. Jaren will have to re-sign for that to happen, I think, just because he's already started his new deal, and his deal was only 4 years. But you've still got all those guys for the next 3 years at least, and that's the most important thing. And yes, and like you said, you know, congratulations to D Bane and everything. And I think that he's going to really kind of take this contract and he's going to use it as kind of like motivation to continue to be a better leader, either on the court, off the court, all of that. And yeah, I think he's really ready to take that next step. And I think that the Grizzlies front office is really telling him through this that they believe in him and they think that he's going to be one of the guys to take them to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, like they said it in the exit interviews, because I went back and watched stuff like that, like the exit interviews, like after he got paid, and I watched like the exit interviews when he got drafted, just because I'm like, just to show how far we come, because it happened like 3 years from now, and it just happened so fast you really forget about stuff like that. But like he was just talking about in the exit interview, like they look at him, you know, Jaren and Ja's, the guys lead this, so I think, you know, this money does show that they do trust him, and also to the contract thing that I was talking about earlier, like with the numbers that he averages anyway, like most guys get a max. Like shout out to DeMichael Cole. He said this basically there was like 13 other players who averaged 21, 5, and 4. And like I think it was like 13 others. Yeah, 13 others, and 11 of them signed like max contracts. And the only exceptions was Anthony Edwards, and he just got his max, and it was Bane, and it was Julius Randle. So basically now it's only Julius Randle who hasn't signed a max. So I think for him, like, that money, again, I'm not really too concerned about like him getting it. And like you said, like they still need to pay Jaren. I think it's like he's got what 2 more years on his deal or something like that. So obviously, but I mean, I think he's gonna want to be here. I don't really have any worries about him being here, especially if the other two are here. And in terms of new CBA, I don't really worry about, because I know people worry about like the second apron, like that the tax stuff and being able to let salary cap stuff like that. I don't think it'll be too much of a worry, especially with the Grizzlies, because teams like the Grizzlies have shown they'll be able to draft and still keep their core intact. Because that's really where the NBA wants you to do now is like draft players and have them on rookie contracts and be really good. Like so, because you can't overpay. Like they're making it trickier, and I think the Grizzlies will be able to adapt to that because they've already been doing that. They've already done that right now, with having young guys on the roster that still have upside, but also give you cap flexibility because they're still in the rookie deals. So congrats to Bane. Again, it's gonna be fun to see him in a I wouldn't say new role. I mean, he is gonna be in a new role from a leadership standpoint, but obviously just an interesting role as one of the guys. Like all three of them, but particularly Bane, especially because he got paid now. And we just saw what happened with Jaren, just having coming off a year where he got paid his contract, or he started to really ball out and have like one of his better seasons. So I expect the same from Bane.
Yeah, for sure. And, re-signing Desmond Bane wasn't the only thing the Grizzlies did in terms of, free agency and extension moves. They also signed Derrick Rose, former MVP, former Memphis Tiger, is going to be back in Memphis this season. And I'll start from a non-basketball standpoint because I really think that's where it's the most important. Because every year, like, there's a lot of people talking about, like, what is he going to do on the court? Which I think he will help on the court at the beginning of the season when, Ja is going to be out and, they're going to need somebody to basically be the backup point guard. But I think the biggest thing for him is going to be his, mentorship of, Ja and Bane and the younger guys. I mean, and this is a guy, they all look up to him, even though he's an older guy and he's probably not going to get as much playing time, down the stretch. Everybody, especially that's around the age of, Ja, Jaren, and Bane, all, and like me and you too, like we were all like, middle school age when Derrick Rose was hitting that, was doing all that, and he really like won MVP, the youngest MVP ever, dunking on people, hitting layups over 3 people every night. And so I feel like it just hits a lot different for those guys hearing it from him. And I think that's going to be really important. And not to say that like, Steven Adams and, Kyle Anderson and those guys aren't great vets to have and listen to. But I just feel like when it comes from a guy like D Rose, who, has won MVP, was a top pick in the draft, all of that, I think it might be not, I think it'll be better for him just to have a guy that's, been there, done that, whether it's playoff games, whether it's, winning awards, being number 1 seed. Like he's basically done anything you can in the NBA, it going through an injury and coming back, he could probably give some really good advice to BC right now. Because, not to say, BC wasn't necessarily an MVP when he got hurt, but a guy who is so based on his athleticism. How do you come back after that when you have a debilitating injury, even though he is ahead of schedule now? So I think just all those little things are going to be really important, just having him out there. And, we saw in the playoffs and down the stretch that they're just like a really young team. They needed some more veteran guys in the locker room. And I think everybody has kind of agreed on that. And the front office, they went out and got Marcus Smart. Now they're bringing in D Rose, 2 guys that I think can, really be that guy off the court to kind of be like a leader and a mentor to the younger guys. And then on the court, I think that he still has enough left in the tank to, especially in the first 25 games, to basically be the backup point guard and probably play like in spurts if he has to, just throughout the season, because there's going to be injuries. There's going to be stuff like that. He might not crack the every night rotation, but I think that we're definitely going to see a lot of Derrick Rose during he signed a 2-year deal. We'll see what happens next year, but I think we'll see a lot of him at least this next season.
Yeah, man. Shout out to D Rose, man. So for perspective, like Bryson was talking about, I am 24. I'm going to be 25. When D Rose was the MVP, I was like, I don't know, like 11, 12, 10, somewhere around that age. So, and he was like one of my favorite point guards growing up. And then obviously, but I was a Grizzly fan too. So now, fast forward, Ja makes, or is on the team and he plays, not saying play like D Rose, but most people compare him to D Rose in some type of aspects, right? So now for them to be on the same team is kind of crazy. And again, I'm gonna break it down from a basketball standpoint, but also just a, positive and negative standpoint. I'm gonna start with the positives. Like you said, vet. Guy's finna be 35. And obviously in the last couple of years, he's been that type of vet for the Knicks. In the sense that people don't really talk about it. You had to really watch interviews, but people, like you said, everybody respects D Rose. Like they understand he's the youngest MVP that's been in the league before. And the thing is, he's been one of the more humble guys about it. Like they've always said, I think even Josh said in an interview, like Derrick Rose would dunk on you and wouldn't say a word. And he's like, nah, I'm not that type of way. Like I gotta let you hear it, like type stuff. And like Derrick even said like he was like one of those guys understanding like he has to play a role. Like last year, like he understood he wasn't gonna get the time because they were giving young guys more opportunity. He understood like, hey, like I'm a pro, I'm a professional, like I am not gonna mess this up and I'm gonna be a vet, true pro. So I think from that aspect, he's definitely gonna help. And I think, like you said, for what his role will be on this team is not going to be too much for him not to handle. I think people will look at the numbers last year and like not take it out of context because last year wasn't as good as his first 2 years or really his first year and then like a half year in New York. But a lot of it was because he's playing like garbage minutes, you know what I mean? And playing like, like with like 5 minutes left in the game, not really playing with rhythm or having a set role. So I think when you provide that context, I think he'll be good, especially with a team like this, where we've seen guys like vets before earlier in the Grizzlies tenure, like a Solomon Hill, like a Jay Crowder, like guys like vets really provide some value in some spots. Even if it's like only for like a stretch of games, they provided some value. So I think D Rose is going to be big help to not only the team, but like we said, Ja respects him. Like remember earlier, people remember when he had triple double. I think it was last season. Like in New York, he was trying to get his jersey or D Rose's jersey or something. Like he was trying to get it signed because he like he said, Rose set the way for guards like him. And I'll say this because I think shout out to Saint, he even said this. Ja wasn't on Twitter for like a month or 2 months, but as soon as Bane signed a contract and Derrick Rose signs with the Grizzlies, he says something that says a lot to some extent. This man has been in like basically like in hiatus mode, dark, 0-30, whatever you want to call it mode, and he come out and say, hey, like like he's happy. You could tell like he's happy for Rose to be here. So I'm happy for Rose to be here. I will say from a basketball standpoint, I wanted a wing with that last spot because again, I think they still need wing help because now you're basically depending. They're either saying, hey, we are comfortable with 3-guard lineups or we're comfortable with our young wings making the league. Now, I think that's okay to have a good gamble on, but that gamble could not pay off, but it also could. So, we'll wait and see how that works out. But I do think, it's obviously, the gamble they're willing to take. And also we got more moves. I'm not going to say they're done because we'll talk about it as we have some more news, but like, they still have a lot more stuff could possibly do because the offseason is not over yet. So, I'll let it develop and play out before I really give it a say. But I am happy. Like once I sat with it, I am happy that D Rose was on this team. And again, he played college ball here too. So like, it's just a match made in heaven. Like the fans, just like fans are going to love Marcus Smart just for how he plays. Fans are already going to love D Rose because he was already here, even if it wasn't under the Grizzlies, but as a Tiger, yeah, fans are gonna love him, especially as a Grizzly. Even if
and I'll say this too is the fans. I feel like even when he's come back for other teams, have been really good to D Rose. Like I remember I went to a Grizzlies Bulls game. I think it was actually during that MVP run. If it wasn't that season, it was like the year after that maybe. But it wasn't when D Rose was in his prime, and it was very clear that everybody in the arena was cheering for the Grizzlies and Derrick Rose. Like that's really what it felt like. So if the Grizzlies scored or if Derrick Rose scored, it sounded basically the same in the arena. And that was when he was playing for the Bulls. So then you add that with he's going to have Memphis across his chest again too. Like, yeah, it's going to be awesome to see, especially like that first game back and everything. And I also heard that he's going to be wearing 23 like he wore in
He is.
college as well.
Yep.
So
He is.
that's another thing that's going to be pretty cool. I'm really excited. I'm excited about having D Rose on the team and everything. But you did mention we got to get to some more news too, and it comes in the form of Dillon Brooks news, which Dillon Brooks is signing with the Houston Rockets, 4 years, $80 million deal. Going to be part of a larger sign-in trade, which we'll kind of get into next. But first, to start with the DB extension and like the contract and everything. First of all, you know what? Just shout out to Dillon Brooks, because at 4 years, 80 million. If the Rockets, if they want to pay him that, like that is all on them. Like that's good. Not to say that he's not worth it. I don't know if he might. I think he's worth more probably to them than he would be to the Grizzlies right now, just because of how many other players the Grizzlies have to worry about paying. So there was never, I think it was pretty clear that once Dillon, didn't sign an extension, he probably wasn't going to be coming back. So I know there was a lot of people saying that, after he signed that contract, that Dillon had decided to go to the Rockets months ago. I mean, there was a lot of people saying it a while ago, and that he really had kind of not necessarily made his decision 100%, but he had a good idea that that's where he was going to try to go. So he got to where he wanted to go. He got a really good contract. After all the people, I will say this, all the people that were coming in with the memes about he's going to be China, he's going to be playing in China, he's going to have to learn a different language and all that. Everybody just looked real goofy, because that man, 4 years, 80 million, fully guaranteed, no team options, no player options, all of that. So, like I said, shout out to Dillon Brooks. And as much as the ending of his time in Memphis was really up and down, I think that people will look back on what he did to really help build like kind of the first phase of this next generation of the Grizzlies. And I'll give him a lot of credit for that. I think he was really important in like the first stage of it. And I think that's something that's also good to see, just from an organization standpoint, is, you get a guy who is a second round pick, and even though he doesn't re-sign with you, you took a guy that was a second round pick and turned him into an $80 million player. So that's something that you can also put kind of like on the list of things that's positive for the organization as well. But yeah, and also they're going to get a sign and trade, so they're going to get something back for Dillon too. That also makes me think that the relationship between Dillon and the front office is not as bad as a lot of people wanted to make it out to be when all those reports came out right after the playoffs.
Yeah. First off, I want to say, like I said, congrats to Dillon. Because again, I know people, like I said, they're talking about him. The jokes are funny and stuff, but like you said, I didn't think he was going to be like somebody was going to sign him. And I think for, like you said, for what that Houston team needs at their building phase of what they're at, they needed Dillon. We needed Dillon for when we needed Dillon, but we outgrew it. Same with that Tyus, and not only Tyus, but any names you say, Melton, Kyle, Jonas Valanciunas, Solomon Hill, Jay Crowder, like they're part of the story, but you eventually have to go into a next phase and different phase, and their value on that team that they're on usually outgrows. And I just think that happened with Dillon. And like you said, I even said it or was thinking it more. I've said both and thinking it, but like you got to think, like you said, no, he was the only person that didn't get an extension. Like BC got an extension, Steve Adams got an extension, Jobsy, Jaren, like they all got extensions, but he was the only odd man out in terms of extensions. And so when that was a thing, you're like, oh, okay, like he's, you know what I mean? Like it kind of went in your head, like they might not sign him back. And then obviously once, all the whole playoff stuff happened, they said they weren't going to sign him back. Yeah, that happened. But like you said, I don't think the relationship is as bad with the front office as most people made it out seem, because if anybody actually read the article instead of just reading the headline from Shams, they said that they mutually agreed that they both would not, like he would go somewhere else and they wouldn't sign it back. Like they mutually agreed on it. But everybody just reads the headline and doesn't read anything in the articles. Everybody loves the headline and then they'll read the actual material that's in the article. So it was never that bad. Now, I didn't think a sign and trade would happen just because Houston had the money to sign him outright. And then on top of that, I didn't know how many teams were going to be involved too. So, now with the Grizzlies, they are getting something back. I know reportedly it was Josh Christopher, but then there was a tweet that came out today that Josh Christopher could be rerouted somewhere else. So it could be different. Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see how that develops. But yeah, definitely congrats to Dylan. Obviously, again, respectfully, I am glad that we didn't have to pay him that money because that isn't a lot of money for a wing that, in terms of if we're going to pay a wing that money, we need something different from the skill set. So I'm glad we didn't have to pay him. But I am glad that he did get paid somewhere else that needs his skill set and needs what he brings to the table. And I think he will be really good in Houston along with Fred VanVleet. Who else they have? Jeff Green. Like, I think that, like, I like what Houston is doing to some regard. So, yeah, definitely congrats to Dylan. Obviously appreciate what he did here. But yeah, this is definitely time for something different and new. Yeah, we'll see how the deal works out because, yeah, like, it's still not set in stone. Like, that whole sign and trade because it's a lot of different teams. So I'm interested to see what the Grizzlies are trying to get. But obviously, I'll say this last thing: any value for Dylan is good value, especially how it ended. You can get any value, no matter if it's like a second round pick, maybe a young prospect you want to see, take a gamble on, swing on. Any value is good, in my opinion, that you can get from Dylan Brooks. So, I'm interested to see what it is.
Yeah, and like you're talking about the sign and trade, it's going to be really interesting to see what exactly it becomes because I know as of now it's just the Grizzlies were supposed to be getting Josh Christopher, but as you said, there's a report now that he might be rerouted as part of the whole Miami in their pursuit of Damian Lillard. Maybe he gets rerouted somewhere, and it might even be a thing that the Grizzlies, have to send something to Portland through Miami as part of the Damian Lillard deal. Like, that's also a possibility that you could never see. I think they're going to be very active because they do have that. Well, either they're going to get the traded player exception, which not sure exactly how much money it would be, but basically it means they would be able to bring in another player's salary in a trade without sending that same amount out. So it basically gives them a little bit more money to play with for the rest of the offseason and really even going into the season. If they wanted to wait until the deadline and use it, they could probably do something like that too. But I will say I wouldn't be surprised if they use it, and then you never know. Maybe you try to see if you can get a guy like Caleb Martin through the whole Damian Lillard stuff. I mean, that's a wing guy that you could look at. I know he just had like an awesome playoff run, so I really doubt they'd want to give him up. But if I'm sure that Zach Kleiman is listening to all these calls, and I wouldn't be surprised if just based on the way that they've kind of handled themselves this summer, I wouldn't be surprised if there's another deal coming at all. So I think that them making it into a sign and trade is going to be really helpful. Whether they get somebody in a deal right now or whether they just use the TPE and use that trade exception to get somebody else later. Either way, I think it puts them in a good situation because they were about to lose Dylan for nothing. Like, I was pretty sure they were going to lose Dylan for nothing if they hadn't traded him by now. But the fact that they ended up getting a sign and trade, they're partly lucky that Houston was looking for other deals too, because like you said, they could have just signed Dylan outright. But it really did help them out that the Rockets were also looking for other deals. But there's a lot of players that have been rumored to be in this sign and trade, but nothing can be official yet. So I guess we'll just wait and see because, we're in the same boat as everybody listening right now. So we'll kind of wait and see what happens, but, we'll keep y'all updated as that comes out.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, right? Because, like you said, there's so many different teams and deals going on, and we're not the only one that has a sign and trade right now, right? Like, we're not the only team that has one going on. Like, I know, like the Smart one, the Smart thing, happened. Obviously, that was like more not. I would say well for Porzingis it was a sign and trade, but they had to move some stuff, and that obviously went through, but that took a couple days. And then, like you said, with the Dame stuff, like that in itself could take a couple days or a week. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shapes out. Because again, I really don't know what they're gonna get back. Because if you get a player back, you still got 16 players on the roster. So that means you're gonna have to cut somebody if you get just Christopher back, let's say you trade one of the back end players like a Conchar. I'm trying to think of anyone. Really, just one name example you could use for Conchar. and then you'd be cool. But it's gonna be interesting to see. Now, could they just get some, if they just get a pick back, then they're cool. But like if they get a player, and then what are they gonna do with that player? Are they gonna keep him? Are they gonna put him in another deal? Like it's just so many moving parts. Um, and obviously we'll wait and see how it develops, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I really don't know what they're gonna do. I don't really have any worry about what they'll get because Kleiman usually tries to find value in any little thing he has. Like he's always done that. So, it'll make sense in the grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment. Like it'll make sense probably down the road, hopefully. And like some of the other moves have happened in the past. So yeah, I'm very interested to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of moving on and kind of switching gears, I did want to get into a little bit of the summer league stuff. So we're going to start talking about the Grizzlies' first summer league game. They came out with a 2-point victory against the 76ers. It was actually a pretty solid game. They were down for a lot of the game and really came back in the second half. But the number one thing that I'll say for everybody going into the summer league is the first thing that I'm looking at is the second year guys. And all of the second year guys, now they might not have all been efficient or they might not have all done the same things, but every single second year player, whether it was, Kenneth Lofton Jr., Vince Williams, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, all of those guys, the guys that are, going to have a chance to really be on the roster this upcoming year, all looked really good. And I think the guy that really stood out to me the most was Vince Williams Jr. Now, Kenneth Lofton Jr. had a really good game, 21 and 13. David Roddy also had an 18-point game, and he had, basically the go-ahead winning bucket. And both of those guys played awesome. But the reason why I'll say Vince Williams is the guy that really struck me in this game is because I've seen Lofton do that before, and I've seen David Roddy do that before. And I've seen both of them do that in NBA games. So it doesn't surprise me if you came into this game and you said, "Oh yeah, Roddy's going to have 18 and Lofton is going to have 21," I wouldn't have been that surprised. But Vince Williams, 19 points, 5 out of 8 from 3, 7 out of 11 overall, 7 rebounds. I really just think he had an awesome game, and it really felt like he's hit a level with his jumper where he's just on a different level than he really was last year in terms of his confidence. And I'm talking like it went from he was confident to his shot to like he got a tech in a summer league game for talking trash after making a three. And I love that. Like I love seeing that kind of edge. So that's the guy that really stood out to me in that game. And then also GG Jackson. He played a good game too. Had 10 points, 4 out of 8 from the field, a couple blocks. Looked really good on defense. I think that was what really stood out to me. A lot of people were worried about, how would he be on defense and all this, but he looked pretty good, first summer league game. Now, I will always say I'm not one to be a summer league overreaction. I'm not going to say that since Vince Williams went 5 for 8 in the summer league, he's going to turn into Klay Thompson next season. I'm not going to say any of that. But when you look at all of this, it's all promising. And that's the number one thing that I'm looking for in the summer is just promising players and guys getting better. And that's going to be the number one thing I'll be looking forward to. And so far, so good in game one. I think a lot of the guys looked really good. At least when you look at the guys that you expect to have a chance to be on the actual Grizzlies roster next year.
Yeah. I don't really, like you said, main thing, I'm like you. I'm not a summer league overreactor. If there's anything funny the funniest thing I'll ever see is summer league reactions, like on Twitter, social media, because folks were, for example, for us, right? We're talking about Jake. I'm gonna talk about Jake real quick. Jake, for the most, he had 11 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. Had 6 fouls. Didn't really shoot the ball particularly well at all, but all the looks were good, and he was getting good looks. He's playing defense. He was doing everything else but making shots. But yet, we're talking about him like he didn't play well at all. Like he looked fine for the most part, but that's the overreaction, right? And so not just him, but people do that with any other people on other teams too. It's just so funny how it works. But in terms of like who stood out to me, like you said, obviously I say Vince Williams. I mean, he hit some shots. And I think the thing is, most people don't know, I think he actually shot the ball well in the G League last year. So it's not really like too much surprise. But again, it's the G League. Not to say nobody watches G League, but most people don't watch it all the time. Maybe they'll catch a game here or two. And so, I think that's probably the most thing. Like he hit some big shots, some timely shots, some shots that got them back in the game because they were down a lot at one point. Couldn't really guard nobody, but they were making shots or started to get a rhythm going into the second half. And I think it was him. Then it was like a Roddy three. Then it was like a Jake three that really helped them out. So I think Vince Williams had played solid. Kenny Lofton did this, what I expect Kenny Lofton to do. He's a guy that's in this type of setting. This is where he thrives. So his numbers, they really surprised me. Double, 11 points, 13 rebounds. But Roddy, I think probably was the guy that looked the most confident. And I'm not saying he's going to take this type of leap, but the comparison I look at is how Bane looked in his summer league when he going into second year, where they kind of just look like they have more confidence in what their game is and what they know how they play. And again, I don't think Roddy's going to take that same leap, but I'm simply saying like you can tell that they understand how they're going to play in this setting because they played a lot of not only regular season games, but they played in playoff games too. Like even though Roddy didn't have a great showing all the time, he showed flashes in the playoffs. So now, if he's probably thinking, if I can play in the playoffs, I definitely can play out here in summer league. Like this is nothing. So I think for him, you could tell that confidence was there. I think the confidence was there for Jake too. Just missed looks, and I'm glad that he didn't pass up looks. Last year, Jake was passing too much for me. I like the aggressiveness. I want you to take the looks. I don't care about the percentages. That's the thing. People gonna look at percentages and everything, and not really looking at everything in the context of it. Like Jake didn't shoot the ball well, but all his looks were good, and he did everything else. So he played solid to me. Vince Williams made shots. Like you said, Gigi Jackson, another one. You can obviously tell that he's 18 years old. He had flashes, like defensively. He showed that he would guard with effort, but he didn't know the concepts. But he's 18. And then on top of that, offensively, you can tell he showed he has skill, but he's trying to figure out where he can really get his shots at, where he can score at right away. And you can see him growing. It's gonna take some time. Like he's 18 years. I just had to keep putting emphasis on this. 18 years old, like young. Like he don't turn 19 till December. Like he's going to need all these reps. We saw how
he's 2 weeks away from being a 2005 baby. That's when you put it into perspective.
That's crazy. Yeah, and that's crazy. So like people gotta understand, he's 18. Not to say that we don't need to be judging him or nothing, but like, do not take anything. Like take it for what it is. Don't be so caught up in what he is right now. Like he's 18. It's gonna take some time. Like you could tell he didn't know the concepts and all that. No disrespect. You just can tell he just didn't have the experience. But he played with effort because that was the thing at South Carolina. He didn't show the effort consistently, and that's what I was looking at. I wanted to see what effort were you gonna give defensively. How are you gonna play? Could you play in the flow of an offense? Because ultimately, the biggest thing I look at with all these players is what is your scalability next to the trio? Because that's all I care about at this point. You can be the most skilled guy on this team, but if your skill set doesn't fit with what the trio needs, it doesn't necessarily matter because you're not going to get that type of opportunity with them to do what you're doing out in the summer league. So, like, yeah, I want to see Roddy or Jake attack more, but they're probably going to be more catch and shoot guys and attack and closeouts when they're playing next to Josh Jaren and Bane. That just is what it is. They're going to be role players. A lot of these guys are going to be role players for us. Even a Gigi Jackson to start out early, even if he were able to get minutes, he's going to play a role next to these guys. Can you be a play finisher? Like little stuff like that, can they do? And I felt like Vince Williams showed that, Lofton to some degree showed it. Roddy, Jake, like they all showed it. Like nothing really stood out to me where I have any concerns. And even if it did, it wouldn't. Again, we saw Santi last year play bad, like the first summer league game, or I think first couple. And then he had, I think it was like third game, he had like 30, and then he was cooking. Like he was good. Like people got to understand it takes time, and you got to understand who they're playing with, how they're playing, like with the context of it, what's their role. Like it's just, you got to understand that these players will probably look better next to actual NBA players and the actual stars of their team for the most part, if they're not the stars of their team already, like some summer league guys. And these guys are going to be more role players. So, you got to judge them in that context. So I wasn't really mad about what I saw. I like what I saw. I just want it to continue to happen, especially for Jake and Roddy. Those are the guys I really want to see continue to take leaps and bounds because I really think they're fighting for positioning. Like one of them possibly could start. Maybe Zaire. Obviously, he's not here, but like they're gonna be playing for minutes. Like that's what it is. Like they're playing for minutes. Like at this point, to me, to some extent. Not saying they're gonna sit one. Like you know what I mean. Like they're not gonna just end all be all, but like it's gonna definitely help. And I want them to continue to keep being aggressive. taking looks because that's what they're gonna need to do when they're playing next to Josh Aaron and Bane. I need them to take open looks and make them. Like Roddy was taking them and making them. So and Roddy, not only that, like I said, big buckets from Roddy, like a big bucket and a big defensive stop. So yeah, I just want them to continue to keep doing what they showed tonight. Especially once they get to Vegas, because once they get to Vegas, you'll have like I think another game or two under your belt. So yeah, I'm interested to see how they look going into this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, as we kind of get into like talking about the Vegas preview and stuff, they will have 2 more games in Salt Lake City that'll be on Wednesday, July 5th and Thursday, July 6th. They're playing the Thunder and then the Jazz. And then, you know, I kind of see like the Salt Lake City is kind of like pre-summer league, like, you know, because I feel like everybody kind of sees Las Vegas as kind of like, you know, it's the main one. It's where almost every team is playing and everything like that. So really, this is kind of just to get them ramped up and get them ready so that first game in Vegas when they play on Saturday is not going to be like the first time they've played together for some of these guys. So I think that's something that's going to be good for them compared to some of those teams that are going to be playing together for the first time when they get to Vegas. That is going to be a positive. But I'll say this kind of as like a preview thing going into Vegas. For me, what I'm looking for has nothing to do with how the team is playing. Whether, you know, they go 3-2, whether they go 1-4, whether they go 0-5. You know, obviously you'd like to see them win some of these games. But the number one thing I'm looking for is for, like I said, the players that are supposed to be on the roster next year specifically to make leaps or take steps and just kind of see like what they look like in different scenarios. Like what does David Roddy look like you said, if he has the ball in his hands a lot more. Now, he might not do that a ton in the regular season, but it's good to see whether or not he can do it consistently, right? And it's just something, you know, you get to kind of see the stuff that the players are adding to their game. And I think that's really just what I want to see is, you know, those young guys just take a lot of shots. Like, I don't care. Like, Jake was 2 for 12, right? If it's the summer league, I'd rather you be 2 for 12 than 2 for 4 because it's summer league. That's what it's for. You're supposed to be trying to get better. You're supposed to be trying new things. You know, maybe you're not just taking catch and shoot shots if you're Jake LaRavia. You're trying to do more stuff off the dribble and stuff like that. I'm fine with that because it's summer league. That's what it's for. So I'm not necessarily worried as much about like the outcome of the games a lot. I'm more worried about, you know, seeing improvements on like the main guys that are going to be there. And also we know how the Grizzlies kind of approach summer league. They're probably going to play a lot of those guys one game, sit a lot of them in the next guy in the next game, just because, you know, summer league is important for like the main roster, but it's also important for like the G League team too, to like see what guys they're going to have on the G League roster too. So they'll probably throw in some games where they play a lot more of the guys that aren't really fighting for a Grizzlies roster spot and are really fighting for like a G League roster spot. So you'll see some games like that most likely. Definitely had that last year. But I think in Vegas, you're probably going to get 3 or 4 games where, you know, you're going to see Roddy and LaRavia and Vince Williams and Lofton. I'd say you'll probably see Gigi Jackson in all the games. So all in all, you'll have something good to look forward to in every Las Vegas game. And I will be in Vegas for Summer League. I will have credentials. So I will be trying to send out as much video and stuff on Twitter as I can. So I'm sure a lot of people who watch this follow me on there. So if you want to see a lot of content from there, I'll be posting a lot of stuff. So it's going to be a fun week for sure.
Yeah, just give a shout out to Bryson, man. So inspirational, man. Look, the man going to Vegas, go have all the videos and stuff. Yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be a great time. It's gonna be a great time. But yeah, no, like you said, I'm really not looking at the wins losses. Like I don't really, respectfully, I'm not saying this in a bad way. This might be one of their. It's gonna sound bad when I say this. It's gonna be one. This is probably one of their worst summer league rosters, but not because they don't have talent, but because the players that you had early, like the first summer league team had like Brandon Clark and all that, like the players that you had on the summer league teams are now like some of your core star players. So you're not going to always have star type players playing on your summer league team. That's just not going to happen. So, I think for them, like this is so I'm not really, this is one of their lesser talented teams. So I'm not really worried about winning losses. Like I'm really worried about, like you said, the players and how they play. Like today, if they would have lost the game, I wouldn't have been tripping at all. Like I don't care about that. Like I care about how these players are looking in the flow and the context of the game and how that will possibly look next to the actual main roster. And like you said, I think they'll probably sit some guys. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Roddy continues to play like this and they sit him for a game or two. Then they start GG and Vince. Especially those guys are two-way guys, so they'll probably prioritize them more for a couple of games, which I would love to see because GG did come off the bench today. I would love to see him in the starting role and see how he adapts to that. Can he keep up the same level of effort and consistency that I saw today, at least from that standpoint, from an effort standpoint? But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Again, I just hope that they continue to do this. Like you said, I want them to continue to take shots like this and be aggressive because they're going to need to when they get to regular season, especially like a guy like a Jake or Roddy, maybe even a Kenny, but really Jake or Roddy, because again, how the wing spot looks, they're going to get ample opportunity, like from day one of training camp. So, it's going to be, this is very key for this is very key for the foundation for them that it'll set going into the fall, because it really can help them going into that season. We saw what it did for Santi. We saw what it did for Bane. We saw what it did for other people that are on this team still now. So you can only imagine what it'll do for these guys now. I don't think it's going to change in terms of how that carryover effect. I don't think it's going to change. So, I just want them to continue to be, keep being aggressive guys, continue to keep playing free and loose, and not really worrying about it. Like you said, this summer league, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss shots. You're going to take some shots that are not unill-advised, but like Jake took a couple step back threes. I didn't mind them. Like it was open. Like I didn't mind him at all. Roddy took some off the dribble threes. Didn't mind him at all. Like empty the clip. Like I'm cool with it. Like that's what you're supposed to do. The summer league. Now, regular season, I don't know. But summer league, do it. I'm cool with summer league. So definitely just continue to be confident and continue to let it go. So I'm ready to see what they do in Vegas. I mean, obviously, I think they got 2 more games or 1 more game here.
Two more. They'll do 2 more games in Salt Lake City, which I'm excited to see the rematch from last year. We're gonna get Kenneth Lofton Jr. versus Chet Holmgren again. That's gonna be cool to see that. On the 5th, that's gonna be fun. And so summer league is really, to me, it's just for fun. I feel like it's much less stressful for like the players and everybody involved than like regular season and playoffs. But it's kind of like practice. That's the way I look at it. It's kind of like practice for the young guys, and it's kind of like just scrimmages. So all of that, it's mostly just for development, and I think that's the number one thing is for fans that aren't used to summer league. There's going to be some shots that you're going to scratch your head at on your team and on the other team. That's just how it is. That's how it is in the summer league, man. Especially for some of these rookies and that are coming from these colleges where they could take whatever shot they wanted. You're going to see some interesting stuff in these summer league games. And I think we saw a little bit of that kind of at the beginning of this first summer league game, where there was a minute where just nobody scored. It felt like nobody scored for like 5 minutes. And that happens in summer league, but that's kind of like the beauty of it, because you'll have that, and then you'll have, the next thing you know, Jacob Gilliard is trading 3-pointers and Kenneth Lofton Jr. is hitting, like, it's so crazy. It's almost like summer league. The way that I'd explain it is all of these guys that are in the summer league, they have like a lot of the guys have the talent to do what NBA players do sometimes. They just can't do it consistently. And I think that's the best way that I can explain it. It's like you're watching a bunch of dudes that can be really good NBA players sometimes, but then the other times it can get kind of nasty a little bit, like I will admit. But that's kind of like the beauty of basketball too, though. So that's why I love Summer League, man. I've been watching Summer League for a minute. Glad to get to go out there and cover it and everything. And it's going to be fun. The Grizzlies, I think, when you look at the teams, there's a lot of teams that don't really treat it the same way the Grizzlies do, and might have some more young players on it. But I think just because of the way that the Grizzlies do it, or guys that aren't going to be on their main roster, they're going to be playing in Summer League a lot more. But for the Grizzlies, I think it makes a lot of sense just for what they're doing right now. The only thing I'm surprised that Zaire isn't playing. That's one thing I am kind of disappointed in. I thought Zaire should be playing. I know he's actually going to be in Vegas for something, the NBA Con, but he's not going to be at the summer league game. So I was kind of confused on that one. I know he's a little bit older than the other guys they have there, and they want to give some time to Gigi. But I did think they would at least, take him. I was kind of surprised he wasn't even on the roster. But all in all, I'm excited for Summer League. I think we're going to get to see a lot from the young guys, a lot more than we get to see in the regular season, and kind of like check in on guys that we didn't get to see a lot of during the regular season last year, especially like Jake LaRavia, Kenneth Lofton Jr., those guys. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of them, and I think it's a great opportunity for the fans too.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it develops. Because again, Jake had 12 points today. He probably could easily end up the next couple games shooting like 40% from three, averaging like 20, looking like what he did in the G League. Like, could change it could happen so fast. Like literally, like it can change in the game. Like every game is gonna be different. So, obviously the one, like you said, the surprise maybe Zaire not being there, but I'm not really like that mad about it, to be honest. Especially when they explain like it's more of the strength and conditioning thing he's already doing training. So I'm not really worried about it. Like at first I was like, man, I want him out there, but at the same time, it's like it is what it is. Because again, like you said, they might be prioritizing other guys, and he's been there for 2 summer leagues. So I don't think they might have felt like, hey, he probably don't need it, you know what I mean, or whatever. They want him to prioritize more staying healthy because then again he did have injury issues last year. So, but I'm excited to see what happens with the rest of the summer league. Obviously we'll keep y'all updated and stuff like that. But yeah, this is gonna be interesting to say the least. That's all I got. I say it'd be interesting. I don't know what to expect, but it's gonna be interesting.
All right, yeah, and I think that'll do it for this week. Kind of a longer show this week, but I appreciate everybody for listening to this episode. We will be back. I'm gonna be doing a lot of stuff from Summer League. I'll also be on the Grizzlies Live podcast after a lot of the Grizzlies Summer League games out in Vegas. So be sure to watch the Bluff City Media Twitter for stuff like that. But for my co-host Alex Winton, I'm Bryson Wright, and we'll see y'all on the next episode live from Las Vegas, possibly. We'll see.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.